Secretary to the Treasury since September 2021, previously a local government minister and a junior Treasury minister, to talk to us about greening the economy. He's going to speak for a few minutes, and then we have about what the Treasury is doing to help us reach net zero. And then we'll open it up to questions. If you want to ask a question, please do put it in the chat or raise your yellow hand. I can't guarantee that I'll see all raised yellow hands. I can't quite see everyone on the screen, but so do put it in the chat. Obviously normal rules apply. Please keep yourself on mute if you're not talking to make it better for the rest of us. Without more ado, I'll hand over to Simon. Thank you very much for doing this. Simon, how is the Treasury helping us get to net zero?
Thank you very much indeed, Anthony, and thank you for the invitation more broadly to be with you all today. It's great to see some familiar faces and many new ones, and it's obviously a very important moment to be having this conversation, because the UK has made such enormously important strides in this space over recent months, and it's something which, despite all the other things that are on the news agenda, is absolutely central to the work of this government and obviously to the work of this department. And it would be a privilege for me to serve as Chief Secretary at any time, but I am genuinely delighted to be doing so at a time when green finance, our wider work on decarbonising the UK economy, is so central to what it is that we're seeking to achieve and to enable. And so it's a doubly exciting commission for me. It's probably helpful to talk first about our wider approach and our philosophy in this space, because since the Rio Climate Summit, which of course is now almost precisely 3 decades ago, we have achieved record clean growth. In fact, between 1990 and 2019, our economy grew by 78%, and our emissions decreased by 44%, the fastest rate in the whole of the G20. And today, as we rebound from the economic impact of the pandemic, the case for clean growth is more apparent and important than ever. Our low carbon and renewable energy economy is already thriving. Immediately before the pandemic, the sector had a turnover of an incredible £42.6 billion. And now, as we start to recover from the shock of the last 2 years, we expect that figure to increase and to increase rapidly. The jobs created by these new green industries will help to reignite our former industrial centres and to level up the country. And of course, speaking as an MP from Teesside, which is at the absolute heart of so much of this work, whether that be on carbon capture and storage, whether that be on the development of offshore wind, whether that even be potentially involvement in new nuclear, there are huge opportunities in those parts of the country which have been left behind and ignored for too long, and where geographically our very uneven growth across the UK has really penalised places like that. The green economy is absolutely central to turning those trends around and to doing so in an economically sustainable way. Our investment in wind power, hydrogen and nuclear promises to provide energy that's both clean and, crucially, and very much in the context of recent weeks, secure. Now, we are acutely conscious of the wider public concern about the global rise in energy costs. And as a government, of course, we're working hard to try and support people through what are very challenging times. That's why we're spending so much on helping households with their bills, and payments up to £350 will cover more than half of the forecast rise in energy costs for a typical household that will be coming into effect from April. This is, of course, on top of the £12 billion spending on supporting people with the cost of living this financial year and next. We need to ensure that our energy policy, as it develops, is fit for the future to address those long-term challenges and to prevent them from biting so hard in the future. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that renewables and energy efficiency improvements are going to play a massively important role in the long-term effort to reduce and stabilise our energy costs. The figures, frankly, speak for themselves. The investment we've already made in renewables and energy efficiency has caused demand for natural gas to fall by more than a quarter since 2010. There's a lot further to go, but there is absolutely no doubt the action we've already taken has helped to reduce our exposure to global price volatility. We've made great progress so far towards creating a green economy. In October, we published our net zero strategy, our blueprint for reaching our 2050 goals. This sets out our plans to decarbonise transport, improve the energy efficiency of homes, schools, hospitals, cut industrial emissions, develop our renewable energy sector, and drive green innovation. And it sets out how we'll spend the £26 billion that we've committed to help achieve this. This includes, for example, an extra £620 million to accelerate the shift to electric vehicles, £310 million of new funding for our world-leading offshore wind sector, and £1.4 billion to help make public sector buildings more energy efficient. This will support, on its own, 440,000 jobs by 2030, of which 56,000 are currently in the pipeline. These are jobs in the high-demand industries of tomorrow. They are the sort of jobs which the UK needs to be generating. Ultimately, of course, we want to leverage in the private sector. This is not something that the government can or should seek to do on its own. And our private sector partners will be absolutely integral to developing the technologies and rolling them out at scale in the way that's going to be needed. We expect private sector backers to invest as much as £90 billion into the green economy by 2030. And you can see some fantastic examples of how this is taking shape. So battery manufacturer Envision is investing £400 million into a major project run by Nissan and Sunderland Council to put the city at the cutting edge of electric vehicle development. I've already alluded to the fact that on Teesside, our old steelworks is shortly going to make way for General Electric's wind turbine factory. And that wider site has been developed thanks to a £107 million loan to the local authority through a new UK infrastructure bank, which the government set up last year. So much of this will be underpinned by green finance, mobilising green finance, something that John Glenn is so passionate about in his role as Economic Secretary, is going to be key to funding the transition to net zero. That includes unleashing the nearly £10 trillion worth of assets that are managed by UK financial services firms. Over recent months, we've taken some bold steps. We've announced economy-wide sustainability disclosure requirements. These will require businesses to report consistent information on how they affect the climate and the environment. We've also announced the new UK green taxonomy to set a robust standard so that we know which investments count as truly green. And of course, we've got our green financing programme itself, 2 record-breaking sovereign green bond issuances totaling £16 billion, as well as launching the first retail green saving bonds. These are products where there is huge demand and where, frankly, I think we've been pleasantly surprised at how successful these have been right from their inception. At COP26, the Chancellor announced the UK will be the world's first net zero aligned financial system. That means moving towards making it mandatory for firms to publish net zero transition plans and committing to a clear transition pathway for the finance sector. And I believe there that we are very much going with the grain of what business and finance want to do, rather than setting expectations which people are reluctant to meet. I think there is a wider societal and business shift underway, which we both need to enable, but also reflect. I've talked a lot today about the link between our economy and our net zero goals, but of course our focus at the Treasury on the environment goes broader than that. We know that our natural capital and the biodiversity that underpins it also plays a key role in supporting and sustaining our economy and livelihoods, and we're increasingly embedding this fact into our thinking. When I was Exchequer Secretary back in 2019 and into 2020, I was responsible for the day-to-day interaction with the Dasgupta review, which of course we commissioned, the first major global finance ministry to commission such a review into the wider economic value of biodiversity, committing to a nature-positive future that leaves the natural environment in a better state than we found it. That is a hugely significant shift, and of course we will now look to turn that work into more concrete reality through the Environment Act, which will include a new historic legally binding target to halt the decline in nature in England by 2030. I mean, no doubt other countries are watching us. There is not just the practical, but the moral example of what we are seeking to achieve and to show what is possible. Fundamentally, I look at this whole issue through the lens of what is both desirable and achievable in a rational way. We must avoid what I think has emerged as a false contention that it is somehow impossible to do the right thing for our economy and the right thing for our environment. I firmly believe it is both rational and necessary for us to do both in tandem. I think that is what the net zero strategy is going to enable. I think that is a intellectual and philosophical and political battle that we must win. And it's something which this government is determined to be on the right side of. And we're very fortunate to have a Prime Minister who genuinely does believe in this agenda in a way which is going to be necessary, frankly, for us to make it a success. If there is one message, therefore, that I want to convey, is that we must fight back against what I think is a genuine false premise that there is a conflicting dynamic at play here. We need to see these goals as going hand in hand and as essential elements in the green and prosperous future that we all want to see. And on that note, Anthony, I'm really at your disposal to take questions.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that overview of the Treasury's work on reaching net zero and your very strong commitment to reaching net zero, which I'm sure will be supported by everyone in the APPG on the environment. As I said earlier, we're open to questions. Do just flag up if you want to ask questions. Either raise your yellow hand or put it in the chat. Until that point, I'm just going to ask one question first, which is you mentioned a lot of different policies. You didn't talk about taxation. I know taxation doesn't fall within your brief, but I was just wondering to what extent the Treasury will use or can use taxation to encourage the route to net zero by incentivising renewables, for example, or penalising non-renewable energy.
Well, I mean, this is a genuinely important issue which we need to work through. How we, in essence, the dynamic between carrot and stick in making the changes that we want to see. And of course, much of what we're doing through our industry work, for example, on carbon pricing, is precisely designed to start to attribute a fairer reflection of the costs of our carbon emission in our wider work. Now, we need to set this against the backdrop that, as we know all too well, frankly, with the Health and Social Care Levy shortly set to come into effect, which was a very difficult but I think necessary decision to address the legacy of the pandemic. We are in a very high tax environment by any historic measure, and we need to make sure that we are not doing things which lead to the UK suffering from an overall decline in our competitiveness or easing the squeeze on both businesses and in particular household finances at what is a very challenging time. I don't want, and I think we as a group of people who broadly subscribe to the fact that net zero is absolutely integral to what needs to happen in the UK and the developed world over the course of this first half century. I don't want that to become seen as a hair shirt movement. I think we have to avoid that sense that all we are doing is increasing the costs and the challenges that already confront people in their daily lives, and that this is just something which is a sort of a regrettable necessity. I think it should absolutely be seen as an enabling shift, which will actually generate huge benefits in terms of jobs and energy security, and will actually also redistribute growth within the UK. So that's sort of the wider framing. Set against that, obviously, yes, the Treasury is always looking at this issue as to what we can do to make sure that our taxation system is aligned with our broader policy goals. And I think there are, of course, interesting ideas in this space. I won't speculate about that because it's never helpful, I think, for a Treasury Minister to be too specific in our thinking in this space. But is it obviously something which we are prepared to look at? Yes. In terms of making sure that we ensure that our wider tax policies are enabling our wider goals. And of course you can look sensibly at how you apportion our taxes so that they deliver against those objectives. And I think, while, as I say, we're clear that we do not want to increase the overall burden of taxation, how that taxation actually pans out is something which, of course, we should continue to review closely, because we do want to make sure that behaviour is incentivised in the way that the tax system can be very powerful in helping us to deliver.
Absolutely. Tax bad, it's not good. We've got a question from Doug Parr. Doug, if you want to I know you are, but if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, of course. Hello to those of you I don't know. I'm Doug Parr. I am Policy Director at Greenpeace. Hello, Simon. Nice to see you again, if only virtually.
Hello, Doug. How are you?
Well, hanging in there, as I suspect we all are.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that helpful overview of action, sort of flowing from the Treasury. I wanted to ask about financial institutions and the City of London, because I think you flagged up from some of the announcements last year about transition plans, or at least the need to produce them. But it was only this morning that a columnist in the Financial Times was writing about banks and climate change, and started off by saying, quote, "It is faintly depressing that leadership and financial services around the shift to net zero still starts with a discussion of coal," which I think epitomizes what we feel when we're talking to banks over the last few years, that whether it's HSBC or Barclays, that's still where it starts. And yet, the urgency of climate change is now so much greater, as we've exemplified by the way the UK has responded to the climate threat by getting out of coal, and for which no praise should be ignored, as it were. But isn't it time to be a little bit more directive with them than just saying, come up with some kind of plan about how you're transitioning? And that the Treasury should be taking a more assertive approach and telling either the Bank of England or Financial Conduct Authority that there should be plans that are aligned with the Paris goals and aligned with 1.5 degrees. Because one of the great things about Britain is that we have a financial sector that is global in reach and is therefore significant in the way that, whilst it's terribly important, our housing stock isn't. Sorry, I've whittled on. Simon, please.
I think you asked the question, Doug.
I mean, first and foremost, Doug, let me say I agree with much of what you're saying. I mean, the absolute priority is to end the wider reliance on coal, which still obviously characterises too much of the developed economy and indeed the developing world's energy base. And I do think actually the UK has done supremely well to make sure that we have exited coal to all intents and purposes, and that will legally, of course, kick in very shortly. In terms of the role of the city, I absolutely agree that there is an enormous amount of influence, not just at home but abroad, that the City of London exercises. And I mean, it is worth recapping where the City of London stands on this. So in October last year, London was ranked as the premier hub for global green finance, and this was specifically attributed to recent UK government action in this space. In November, we became the first country to commit to making disclosures aligned with the Task Force on Climate related financial disclosures, fully mandatory across the economy. In June last year, we introduced, of course, the new economy-wide reporting requirements, and the Chancellor announced that we will integrate the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosures reporting, with new cutting-edge metrics, including impact reporting against the UK green taxonomy in the new sustainability disclosure requirements. We do, to your point about the regulators and sort of the harder push, we have now got climate change included in the remit of our regulators. That's been the case since March last year. So both the FCA and the PRA now have that in their remit. And it was also in the March 2021 remit letter that the Treasury sent to the Bank of England as well. And that is now starting to filter through into real action. So in June, the Bank of England published some quite pioneering climate scenario exercises to assess the resilience of the financial system in this regard. And the Chancellor chaired a meeting of G7 finance ministers and central bank governors in London, where we were instrumental in getting those countries to move towards making climate disclosures mandatory across their economies as well. I think there is a lot more which will happen in this space. As I say, I think there are a lot of people and institutions who do want to do the right thing without needing too much of a hard steer from government. But there is a clear expectation, I think, of asset managers and asset owners to integrate climate into investor stewardship. That is something which is coming from us as a government, but I think it's also bottom up from investors themselves. There has been a major public shift, which I see as a constituency MP. I detect there is a new awareness of these issues, which is much wider and deeper than was the case even 5 years ago. And I think that trend, that bottom-up pressure, will only intensify, and that will of course drive action as well.
Okay, that's great. We've got the questions piling up, so I'm going to take them in twos, actually, because we've only got 20 minutes or so. And if you could keep your questions succinct, that would be very much appreciated, I think, by everyone. So first of all, Claire Davidson, you had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to just know how going green is compatible with having a new oil field approved just off Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the other question, as I take them to, is Chris McEwen, who's from the Press Association, I believe.
Yes. My question was basically that there seems to be a sizable chunk of the Conservative Party who are attempting to rein in the net zero agenda in the form of the net zero scrutiny group. So how concerned are you that they'll be able to succeed in that? And what is your response to their attempt to link the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis to net zero?
Thanks, Chris. Well, to start with Claire's question, I think we have to be very, very clear that while we are working hard to end our reliance on fossil fuels, and there are very sound reasons, both climate and in terms of wider security as to why we need to do so, there will obviously be an ongoing demand for oil and gas as a transition fuel over the years ahead. And I don't think we can or should shy away from that reality, nor from the huge significance it has to parts of the UK economy. And I'm thinking particularly here of areas like North East Scotland. And I do think that the SNP government has gone far too far in terms of its attitude towards this sector, because we will not be able to make a successful transition to a lower carbon, more secure energy mix without, as I say, making sure that we do have successful transition policies in place, and an orderly transition underpinned by oil and gas will be crucial to that. In the climate change committee's net zero scenarios, gas demand in 2050 ranges from between 9 and about 50% of today's levels. And so there is still a potentially significant role for gas even in 2050. And obviously that will need to be married up with our wider carbon capture, utilisation and storage policies. We've committed £1 billion, as you know, to developing CCUS, with 2 clusters due by the middle of this decade and 4 by 2030. And this is an enormously exciting technology. The North Sea Basin provides some extraordinary opportunities in this regard. And of course, as we know, there are others around the coast of the UK. And I do think that, you know, this is something which, you know, is an argument we need to win, that we shouldn't, if you like, set up a tension whereby we have to immediately de-scope what is a foundational industry and a foundational part of our energy mix right now. I think, to close on this question, that the North Sea Transition Deal, which was delivered last year, is a really good example of how a government can work with the offshore oil and gas industry in genuine partnership to achieve a managed energy transition, which doesn't leave any sector or anyone behind. And the commitments in that deal will achieve 60 million tonnes of carbon reduction. We are currently consulting on a new climate compatibility checkpoint for future licensing on the UK continental shelf, which will help us to assess whether any future licensing rounds remain in keeping with our wider climate goals. And indeed, the OGA's new strategy as well imposes new net zero considerations in the consent process, including factoring in the cost of carbon as part of their decisions. So I think our work in this space will become progressively more more sophisticated as well over the course of these next couple of decades, which is where this transition will really pivot around. To Chris's question on the wider issue around how we address net zero, how we deliver it. I mean, I think the first thing to say is I completely understand, deeply understand, because obviously I'm a MP like everyone else in Parliament. I see the genuine pain that constituents are feeling at a moment where, as we know, energy prices are both volatile and high. And there is an understandable concern, completely understandable concern, to make sure that those costs don't become unmanageable for people. What I think we, as I said in my opening remarks, what we need to do is to win the argument in a calm and measured way that actually it is economically rational for us to make this transition, that it is actually helping to mitigate those high costs, that we've reduced our reliance, for example, on gas by a quarter over the last 11 years. That is a material win, frankly, in terms of keeping costs down. And it is now the case that it is cheaper to deliver new offshore wind farms than it is to build new gas-fired power stations. That is the logic which now applies to investment decisions, and therefore it would be positively irrational for us to resile from our net zero commitments. As I say, I don't think anyone's doing this out of anything other than a genuine concern to protect their consumers, but we just need to really make sure everyone really understands the new energy paradigm, and that has changed even since, say, 2015, when this argument started. There has been a huge shift in where we stand, and I just think we all of us have our role to play, myself included, in showing that there is no there is no benefit either environmentally nor economically to going backwards. Indeed, if anything, we will only be able to really drive down costs further by being in the vanguard of the global move away from over-dependence on hydrocarbons.
That's great. Thank you for your comprehensive answers. Now coming to Sean Trigg, had a question about carbon capture and storage.
Thank you, Anthony. Yes, FCC have signed up to a ESA strategy which takes us to net zero by 2040. And within our strategy, we've got various measures which we think are sort of sequestering or locking away the carbon permanently. But we're not really familiar with is the infrastructure in place in terms of regulatory and obviously any financial support or taxes and that sort of side of things to enable us to get those schemes or projects approved, so that we can be confident that what we're putting in the plants and what we're delivering in terms of locking away the carbon is valid.
Can you just say what FCC are, what you are, what area you're in?
We're a waste management company.
Right.
Thanks, Sean. I think the issue of sequestration is absolutely vital, and it ranges in scale, doesn't it? From the large CCUS kind of projects that we're talking about, right through to the peatland and forestry initiatives, which are going to be so crucial both to our nature recovery work, but also to our wider carbon goals. And I think our work on carbon sequestration is already being supported through our Nature for Climate Fund for tree planting and peatland restoration. The woodland and peatland carbon codes are allowing negative emissions to be traded on what are very high standard voluntary carbon markets. And I think these are tools which are growing in sophistication. We need to help to support so that we can achieve the right standards here, because there are going to have to be quite profound changes to how we manage UK land. And this is something I think Michael Gove did a superb job on when he was the Environment Secretary. He managed to really, he made DEFRA sexy in a way that few politicians have managed, and he did so by a relentless focus on how policies like this are absolutely going to be at the cutting edge of how we manage the issues of carbon sequestration. I think that is that ecological and landscape sensitivity piece sits neatly alongside the fact we do want to make sure that we have the most developed and sophisticated possible tools for making, for ascribing carbon to these projects.
Thank you. And then come to Colin Britchfield.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Colin Britchfield from E3G. Just wondering, in light of the high gas prices we discussed, and which may well be an ongoing issue for the foreseeable future, particularly in light of the situation in Russia, whether the Treasury is considering, reviewing the commitment set out last year at spending review, perhaps the upcoming spring statements on the kind of pace and scale of energy efficiency investment. You mentioned the public sector decarbonisation fund and also social housing, which are both very welcome, but there is a gap crucially for the owner-occupied sector, and we know that many people who own their own homes will be struggling with energy bills in the coming years. So great to hear if there's any more plans from the Treasury on that front.
Thanks, Tom. This is a massive strand of it as well, of course, and it does bring home just how full spectrum the route to net zero is going to have to be. You are ranging right across the piece, from the city to our natural environment, and of course to our wider housing stock. And of course, the UK does suffer some particular challenges here, because so much of our building stock, compared to many countries, is older, as we all know, and therefore less energy efficient. And we need to create a long-term, stable regulatory framework across all types of buildings, while targeting support to encourage early adopters and to protect the vulnerable as we do so. So we have an ambition, as you know, to phase out all new fossil fuel heating from 2035, and we're consulting on an earlier date for high carbon fossil fuels to heat homes that aren't connected to the gas grid. We're consulting also on a market mechanism to put industry at the heart of efforts to develop heat pump supply chains and to transform the customer proposition for heat pumps in the UK, which is going to be crucial. We can't afford for this to be something which is out of reach for millions of people. What that amounts to is 3.9 billion over the SR period for heat and buildings decarbonisation, which includes 1.8 billion targeted at low-income households and 450 million for the boiler upgrade scheme, which is all about providing the right incentives to incentivise homeowners to change how their homes are heated and to install heat pumps. We're also looking at the long-term regulatory standards issue. So we're upgrading the change will be that if you're in a privately rented home, that's got to be EPC-C by 2028. And for private commercial rented buildings, that's going to be EPC Band B by 2030. And we are considering setting a long-term regulatory standard for social housing. That is subject to consultation. From 2025, all new buildings in England will be net zero ready, which I think is absolutely sensible. The costs of having to retrofit homes ought not to be something which we're building in literally to our new building stock. That's something which I feel very strongly about. I'm delighted we've done that. We're going to have enough of a challenge dealing with our existing stock without creating more problems for us to have to fix retrospectively over the years ahead. We do acknowledge that there is going to be more work in this space. This is something which is genuinely very sensitive given the wider cost of living challenge. But we are also clear that there is no choice but to embark on this mission, because if we don't get this part of it right, all the progress which we've made in sectors like power and are making in transport will be undermined fatally in terms of our ability to deliver net zero by 2050. It's worth noting that we're soon going to launch a fairness and affordability call for evidence on our long-term options in this space, with a particular focus on rebalancing electricity and gas prices, with a view to taking decisions in the course of this year.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take the next two questions together. So it's Robert McElveen from the Mineral Products Association, I can see, and then a question from Rahul Sareen from Go Ahead Group. We've only got about 7 minutes left, so if you keep it brief.
Sure. So it's really a question about carbon leakage. So industrial decarbonisation will require a huge amount of investment. And thank you for government support on CCUS and hydrogen. But UK-based industry faces higher energy costs and carbon costs than EU competitors. So and has done for years, regardless of what price the energy market's at. So really, what's Treasury considering doing to lead us to do decarbonisation rather than just offshoring?
And Rahul, your question.
Hi, Simon. Firstly, I'm sorry I joined a little bit late due to IT issues.
Not at all. I'm the last person to criticise anyone for IT issues. Believe me, it's all my office for the test.
It was just really about how does the Treasury in practice, I guess, value, increasing environmental efficiency. Obviously, the Treasury had an outsized and far more than we would wish role in supporting public transport through the pandemic, which has been vital. But a corollary to that has also been, I guess, advice to encourage people not to use public transport or indeed not to travel at all. So I was interested to know from your perspective how Treasury make the most from that investment in terms of encouraging people back onto rail and bus to restart, I guess, the economy, and also to maybe make a few steps that might encourage that through, I guess, road pricing or more bus lanes. And clearly there is a trade-off too, and it goes alongside active travel as well. But yeah, sorry, I've slightly got my question.
Okay. So
no, well, to take perhaps Rahul's question first on the wider issue, there is a huge piece on transport transition. And this is something which lay at the centre of the spending review, which we conducted last autumn. And we are incentivising the uptake of all forms of both electric vehicles, of green buses, and trying to make sure that the infrastructure associated with those exists beyond our big cities. Because I mean, I represent a northeast constituency where at the moment it would be very hard, frankly, to run an electric car in the way which, when I'm in my London home in Wandsworth, is totally, all that infrastructure you can see is there now in a way which it just isn't in Middlesbrough. So there is an enabling piece of work in transport which is absolutely vital that we play a direct government role in, but much more importantly, I think that we incentivise and support the private sector to help deliver. Just a couple of miles away from Wandsworth, you've got that new first all-electric vehicle charging Shell station in Fulham, and that's a good example, I think, of how the private sector is now starting to speak up and to deliver in terms of our transport network. That is something which is incredibly exciting and which we're going to need to support. On transport in the round, one of the negative consequences of the pandemic has obviously been that people stopped using public transport. And we are also in what is a complicated and important piece of work about how we support a managed transition back in both rail and bus usage as well, as we return to normality. And this is hard because we've had to pump in huge sums to keep those networks running, and Treasury cannot remain in a position indefinitely where we are providing that level of subsidy. Equally, of course, we recognise it will take some time for consumer habits to re-normalise. So there's a lot of work going on in that space, which is reflected, of course, in part in the ongoing negotiations with TfL in the capital. But it's a much wider discussion around that. In terms of the support that we provide to carbon-intensive industries, and Robert raises a really important issue here, because we do not want, and it would be utterly perverse for the cost of net zero to be the anchor industries in areas from steel to cement to ceramics, all of which are crucial to the UK economy, all of which have my strong support, and all of which need to remain viable while we deliver these changes. And I think you only need to look at the potential of things like carbon capture, utilisation and storage to see how we're going to have these in place in order to keep these industries in our country. It will simply not be possible for industries which emit carbon often as an intrinsic part of their manufacturing method, let alone from what energy source they're using. Many of them just emit carbon as a condition of producing key goods. It would be perverse in the extreme were we to force these industries out. So carbon capture is vital. In terms of the relatively high energy costs that UK energy-intensive industries face, we are working very hard on this. And so in recent years, we have provided extensive support, including energy price relief schemes for eligible sectors, which include steel and chemicals, cement, ceramics, paper and glass. Since 2013, that's totaled more than £2 billion in relief, including over 600 million specifically for steel. And this is something where we continue to look very closely at what we can sensibly do in order to support our industrial base. And there is no question that it is much on the minds of both HMT and BEIS as we go through this spring in particular, when prices are so high.
Great, thank you very much for that answer. We've got a few more questions, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. I promised that we'd finish at 10:45, and it's now 10:45. So thank you, Simon, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for your time as well. It's been a really fascinating discussion about the role of Treasury, and we'll watch with close interest how you take forward a lot of the initiatives that you raised today. And obviously, we wish you all best efforts in reaching that. So thank you.
And thank you to everyone who's asked questions. I really appreciate it. It's so important, and your help is going to be vital in landing the wider premise, as I say, that there is not some false trade-off here, and that we all need to be working in concert to deliver something which is good for the environment, but also, crucially, will enable the UK to be more prosperous, more successful, and more geographically equal in terms of our prosperity as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.